Donald Trump may very well have gotten the United States into another war. This is the type of rhetoric that will unite, that can feasibly unite the Middle East, right? We have heard from MBS of Saudi Arabia denouncing what Donald Trump has said. We have heard, obviously, from Islamic militants, from the Palestinian Authority to Islamic Jihad to Hamas, who have all understandably denounced what Donald Trump has said. We have heard Iran denouncing what Donald Trump has said. Even from Egypt and the foreign minister, not necessarily directly addressing, but instead saying we will continue to rebuild Gaza. But across the Middle East, there is a real deep dissatisfaction and anger with what President Trump is proposing.
You know Trump went too far when he did something so morally reprehensible that both Iran and Saudi Arabia are on the same page about how bad it is. But it's not just the Middle East who condemned Trump's plans to annex Gaza. The rest of the world was also up in arms, including countries, by the way, that were complicit in the displacement of Gazans in the first place. Now, Jake Johnson of Common Dreams reports, quote, any forcible transfer in or deportation of people from occupied territory is strictly prohibited, Volker Turk, the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, said in a statement. Jake Johnson goes on to explain how France's foreign ministry warned that this would be a serious violation of international law, and Germany's foreign minister echoed that same claim, saying that it would be illegal, and added it would also lead to new suffering and new hatred, she warned. There's more. The UK's prime minister broke with Trump on this issue, and as Al Jazeera reports, other European leaders also condemned Trump's move, including Spain and Ireland. Turkey has condemned this move. Leaders in Canada have condemned this move. Brazil, Japan, Australia, international human rights organizations, they've all forcefully condemned this move. But there is one country that's with us, and of course, it's Israel. We are the state equivalents of Thelma and Louise, and both the United States and Israel are driving right off that fucking cliff. Spoilers, I know. Now, when you move away from the issue of Gaza, it's not lost on the rest of the world as well that Trump's quest for global conquest is contributing to our diminishing reputation. Panama is bracing for war because even though they're optimistic about striking a deal with Rubio, who they view as more reasonable, Trump doubled down on his military threat towards them. And we haven't even touched on his threats to Greenland, as well as his threat to conduct military strikes in Mexico on cartels, and the back and forth on tariffs with North American allies. And just to give you a sense of Trump's mentality, so he was asked about Iran's alleged attempt to assassinate him, and just listen to his response to that.
Iran and their proxies who have threatened to retaliate against you and your team by killing you guys for taking out Soleimani.
Well, they haven't done that, and that would be a terrible thing for them to do, not because of me. If they did that, they would be obliterated. That would be the end. I've left instructions. If they do it, they get obliterated. There won't be anything left.
Now, to be fair, I don't expect Donald Trump, or the United States for that matter, to do nothing if Iran were to do something like this. Because, of course, we're allowed to assassinate their officials with impunity, but they're not allowed to retaliate. But he says that he's given the orders to obliterate them, his word, to the point where there'd be nothing left. So I guess that means that all 89 plus million Iranians would presumably be murdered, even though they'd have no control over the actions of the perpetrator in that hypothetical situation. Now, I think that most people, with the limited time that we all have in this world, would want to leave it in a better place for their children and grandchildren. Trump, however, wants to leave it worse off. He'd want genocide and a potential world war to follow his demise because he thinks that his life is more valuable than the lives of 89 million Iranians. This is a truly demented, psychopathic mentality, and while I don't expect anyone to be happy about the prospect of their own assassination, obviously, it's certainly a choice to vocalize that comment, right? Not to mention, he's not a young man. So when eventually he passes away at some point, are we going to have to worry about his cultists concocting some conspiracy theory about how Iran was responsible even if they weren't? Will that lead to Republicans using his death as a justification to invade them one day? I mean, these are questions that we wouldn't have to entertain if America didn't elect so many fucking psychopaths. But this unhinged behavior, is why the world is turning on us. We are becoming a pariah internationally, and rightfully so, because we pose the biggest threat to international peace and stability by far. We blatantly disregard international law and helped usher in a return to the days where might makes right. And to be fair, it's been this way for a really long time, not just Donald Trump, right? It's just that the facade has really slipped away now to the point where even Americans are beginning to see what the rest of the world has always seen, from Vietnam to Iraq to the Biden administration shielding Israel at the UN Security Council in defiance of international law. We have made it so that way international law means shit. It means nothing. The rules are dictated by the strongest, which is us, conveniently. So if we say something is good, it's good because we make the rules because we're the strongest. What are you going to do? Challenge us? We have all the weapons in the world. We're the biggest military, biggest economy. You can't do shit. That's why America can get away with all this. There's an effort right now to sanction the International Criminal Court by our politicians for daring to issue warrants for war criminals in Israel. That is how rogue we've become as a country. And the reality is that if we were not the largest economic and military superpower in the world, we would be cut off from the international community and we'd be sanctioned if Trump actually did follow through with his plan to annex Gaza. And to add insult to injury, we're not just the laughingstock of the world. Our politicians have their heads so far up their own asses that they actually think the evil things that our empire is doing makes them look good, to the point where they want to put their names on it. For example, after Trump announced his plan to take over Gaza, Republican Nancy Mace tweeted, "Let's turn Gaza into Mar-a-Lago," because I guess this is just one big fucking joke to them. And I should note that there's at least one Democrat who supports this idea, John Fetterman, who blames Palestinians for their inability to govern and not the country that's occupying them. Now, this goes without saying, but these people are sick, sadistic sociopaths, and their presence in our government is a sign of our moral decay and indicative of the fact that the American empire is on its deathbed. Healthy countries don't elect politicians that openly relish in other people's pain and suffering. And the fact that there are so many other unhinged barbarians like Nancy Mace and John Fetterman, it's so much more than an international embarrassment, right? It's not just that I'm embarrassed to be an American because of the way our politicians act. It's a plague upon the entire fucking human race. That's how despicable I find this. But we've fallen so far as a nation that politicians have the audacity to defend ethnic cleansing on national TV with no pushback, by the way.
I think he's telling the Middle East that the last 50 years of doing things was not a correct way of doing things, and that he's going to change it up because all of those iterations have not worked. He's also telling the Middle East that he wants to be transparent with the Palestinian people. Gaza today is uninhabitable and will probably be uninhabitable for at least the next 10 to 15 years. That's how much work has to be done there.
Are other countries in the region, Steve, because you have been, deep into the negotiations on all sides, are they willing to step up, help this population, and rebuild the area and demilitarize it?
I think everybody wants to see peace in the region, Sean. And peace in the region means a better life for the Palestinians. A better life is not necessarily tied to the physical space that you're in today. A better life is about a better opportunity, better financial conditions, better aspirations for you and your family.
Just so we're clear, you heard Trump's Middle East envoy explicitly make the case for ethnic cleansing on national television. And I'm assuming that most of the baboon-brained boomers who were tuning in didn't even think anything of it. But this shouldn't be a surprise to any of us, as disgusting as it is, since politicians and public figures have spent the last year or so defending a fucking Holocaust in Gaza. So I guess to them, they actually think that they're being humane by ejecting all Gazans from their homes. These people are such fucking monsters, and there just aren't words to articulate how gross they are. But let's look at another clip where a Fox News propagandist is going to actually describe Trump's conquests as bold ideas, and then a GOP congressman is going to spin said bold ideas in an attempt to sanewash them.
Trump's bold ideas are just happening with such a rapid pace. It's unbelievable. From Greenland to the Panama Canal to the Iron Dome that he wants in America to now the U.S. potentially taking over the Gaza Strip. I want to get your take on all of this. Do you really believe that the U.S. can achieve taking over the Gaza Strip, even as you've got other regional countries saying, well, we need a two-state solution?
Well, first and foremost, the two-state solution has been something that they always talk about at the UN or any model UN class in any high school in America. But it is not functionally possible. Who is Israel supposed to actually negotiate? The Palestinian Authority? I don't think so, because their leadership is significantly older and there's no clear line of transition to who's going to take over next. So you can't cut a deal with them. I think that what President Trump is talking about is working with Israel and other allies and friends in that region in order to clean Gaza up under U.S. leadership.
Yeah.
Not direct U.S. decision making, but U.S. leadership.
Okay, first of all, that's not what he said. He said he's going to take over Gaza, which implies annexation. Second of all, if politicians wanted to clean Gaza up, they could start by not supplying Israel with the bombs that they're using to dirty Gaza, if that's the analogy that we're going with. We're about to send them another $1 billion of our tax dollars for bombs and bulldozers. So if you really want to clean up Gaza, why not start that process right now? See, Byron Donalds is full of shit. He is one of hundreds of politicians that has repeatedly voted to fund the destruction of Gaza. So for him to talk about it as if a storm or some inexplicable tragedy hit Gaza is pretty fucking patronizing. Gaza was deliberately destroyed. You gave Israel the bombs to do it, you murderous piece of shit. So fuck you and fuck all of your colleagues who have blood on their hands too. And I can't stress enough how morally reprehensible the prospect of cleaning Gaza up for other people to live is. Like, that's their fucking homes. Nobody else has a right to it, nor should they be told that they're not allowed to go back to their homes. And MSNBC's reporter that we heard from at the beginning, she actually made a really amazing point, and she talked to Gazans, and they explained why this is our fucking homes, and it's important to us. We want it. You don't get to tell us to leave.
We can't leave our homes. How you dare? How dare you to say you should leave your homes? We can't. This is Palestine, and we Palestinians are the only ones who have the right to live here and never to leave it.
We will never leave our town. Palestine for us, this is never changing.
I mean, there are people live there. There is Gazan civilians who lives in Gaza. I don't understand the idea of just taking over.
Richard is right, is that it feels as if Donald Trump is forgetting about history. One of the reasons why Hamas, Mika, came into power in 2006 is because Hamas essentially promised infrastructure, right? They promised schooling, they promised food, they promised aid. The person, the people, the organizations, the country that will win the hearts and the minds, for instance, of the Palestinians remaining on their land will be the people that are providing them with the infrastructure, the aid, the food, the water that they desperately need, and the infrastructure, for instance, to rebuild. I just want to say one final thing, right? As we were looking to Los Angeles and the wildfires that happened there in the Palisades, you saw major destruction, and people were incredibly upset over losing their personal belongings and their homes. But it was really about the community, right? The churches, the schools, the coffee shops in which so many of them convene. These Gazans have walked, marched, driven thousands of miles, right, back to their homes in North Gaza after this ceasefire to commune in rubble because this is their homeland. This is where they want to remain, not because of the structures in which they have lived in, Mika, but because of the community they have been surrounded by, the families and the people they know. And that, it seems, is something that is being lost by both the president of the United States along with Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu, Mika.
And that right there is what these politicians will never understand because they don't have the emotional capacity to love. Their hearts are cold and their souls are dead. So they have no way of empathizing with Palestinians in Gaza or any other human being for that matter. And they simply can't comprehend how someone's homeland isn't just about geography, but it's also about community and identity and the collective struggle. And the reason why it's so hard for them to comprehend this is because they are sociopaths. And I'm not using that term as a pejorative. I think these people are literally sociopaths in the clinical sense of the word. And side note, I've got to say, I'm really pleased to see this segment on MSNBC, specifically Morning Joe, because back when Biden was president and students were protesting his complicity with genocide, Morning Joe went out of their way to smear those students.
Tell us about this change.
Yeah, so when we entered Hamilton Hall, this is not what students bring to school. Okay, this is what professionals bring to campuses and universities.
Don't think so. As a matter of fact, that bike chain was sold by the university, you dumbass dipshits. But hey, I'm happy to see this sudden change of coverage. Welcome to the resistance again, Joe and Mika. But don't think that we've forgotten or will ever forget the role that you played in whitewashing this genocide and attacking people brave enough to speak out against it. Again, I'm happy to see you change your tone now that Donald Trump is president, but genocide should not be a partisan issue. And the fact that it is to you, presumably, speaks to your immorality. And I'm sorry, I feel like I'm going crazy. Like, I just have to stop for a moment and point out that, like, I shouldn't have to explain why genocide is bad. I should be talking about healthcare and high-speed rail. But instead, I feel like I'm forced to teach Ethics 101 to our caveman-ass politicians and pundits, although cavemen probably had a better sense of morality than the politicians and pundits that, you know, we have today. So yeah, it's just frustrating. But as hopeless as things are, I don't think that you should give up. And I hope that my frustration doesn't make you feel like, oh, it's too bleak and we should give up. In fact, people around the country are mobilizing and organizing peaceful protests. And the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, is already softening Trump's stance, saying that it's not necessarily annexation we're talking about per se, rather it's an offer. Now, whether or not Trump comes out and contradicts him, that's something that we'll have to wait and see. But listen to what he had to say.
Gaza has been severely damaged. If you look at the aerial imagery, you see what's happening. The billions of dollars that are going to be required for reconstruction are enormous. Some areas have been rendered unlivable now and for the foreseeable future. And so what President Trump announced yesterday is the offer, the willingness of the United States to become responsible for the reconstruction of that area.
Well, we'll see what Trump has to say about that, because Trump has repeatedly doubled down on the insanity and contradicted Marco Rubio after he tried to minimize Trump's insane comments. But I love how they're finally admitting that Gaza has become uninhabitable. I mean, this is what we have been saying to you for more than a year. And as things continue to get worse, politicians like Marco Rubio refused to stop making them worse. He refused to stop sending Israel the bombs that they were using to drop on the heads of children in Gaza. And when he was confronted about his complicity with genocide from activists, look at his smug-ass fucking response.
Are you filming it? So I want you guys to get this. I want them to destroy every element of Hamas they can get their hands on. These people are vicious animals who did horrifying crimes, and I hope you guys post that.
Hey, fuckface. What ended up happening was the IDF terrorists who you gave the bombs to ended up destroying every element of Gaza that they got their hands on, not Hamas. Hamas is still very much a thing. And if Israel is ever able to get rid of Hamas, then Hamas too will emerge shortly thereafter, because there's going to be a lot of angry, pissed off, radicalized people who are going to want revenge for the deaths of their family members. Now, on a more positive note, I guess, it's a little encouraging to see Democrats finally speak out against what's happening in Gaza after funding their destruction for more than a year now. You know, looking for the silver lining where I can find it. And I'm even pleased to see some Republicans speak out against Trump, even if their criticism is tepid at best. For example, Rand Paul tweeted, "I thought that we voted for America first." Yeah, well, I mean, what are you going to do about it, Rand? You're going to invoke the War Powers Act or hold him accountable in any way, shape, or form aside from a tweet? Don't think so. Additionally, Politico reports that GOP lawmakers like Tom Tillis are confused by his plan to take over Gaza. Okay, great. They're confused. I mean, why don't you take his dick out of your mouth for a second and just call it what it is? It's a war crime. I mean, all these lawmakers are like 95 years old and they're worrying about re-election, so they don't want to offend Donald Trump and his cult base. Have a fucking spine for once in your life. I mean, I say that as if they're opposed to what Trump is doing, but in actuality, most of them support it ideologically and politically. Now, I'm sorry I said that was a more positive note, but it's just so hard to be optimistic at all when the situation is so bleak and the best pushback that we get from Democrats are objections on procedural grounds and Republicans politely pointing out that this seems a little bit antithetical to his America First message. I mean, he doesn't care about decorum or procedure or the Constitution. He doesn't care if saying one thing and doing another makes him look like a hypocrite. He doesn't care. He's using his power. And the people who have power that Americans also gave power to need to wake up and use their power to stop him. Because guess what? He's not a king. He can't do whatever the fuck he wants. Is it really that unreasonable to expect politicians to use the power that we gave them? I mean, it seems like the only people capable of actually wielding power and getting things done are the most evil ones, with no remorse for the pain and suffering that they're causing. I mean, why can't the less bad politicians be as effective or even half as effective as the most evil ones? It's so frustrating. But that right there is the state of American politics. We are an international laughingstock, and we absolutely deserve to be.